IVM.
Welcome to episode 63 of the Edges and Sledges Cricket Podcast on the IVM Podcast Network. This week, I'm your host, Ashwin. I am back in North America, and we are all now in 3 separate time zones again, as normal. I have joining me DJ in London, who's kind of at the epicenter of World Cup fever, and then Varun, who's now back in Singapore, at least for the moment. So, guys, thank you for being on the show. For anybody who's a new listener, Edges and Sledges is a weekly cricket podcast. We talk once a week. We get together, talk about all things in the world of cricket with a focus on Indian cricket. And as of a few episodes ago, we're now part of IVM Podcasts. They're India's largest podcast network. So check them out at ivmpodcast.com. And you can find Edges and Sledges on pretty much all social media at One Tip, One Hand. That's number one tip, number one hand. So definitely give us a shout. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to get questions, feedback, etc. But with that, guys, let's jump into the show. We are recording this on an awesome day for Indian cricket, as India has just defeated Pakistan pretty convincingly, I would say. So, Varun, let me start with you. Quickly, first reaction on India versus Pakistan?
Yeah, it's awesome. I mean, to be 7-0 up in World Cup history is just amazing. And what a feeling to win this so convincingly.
Yeah, absolutely. So 7-0, meaning, of course, 6 matches before this one. And then the 2019 World Cup makes it the 7th win. DJ, let me just quickly ask you before we get into too much detail. It really felt like, as we were growing up, 99, 2003, etc., felt like matches where India-Pakistan was a big game and India sometimes were favorites. More often than not, Pakistan were favorites. Has it kind of become expected that this will be a one-sided encounter now, and was essentially the Champions Trophy final the anomaly, and really we should expect this result where India convincingly wins?
So I was talking to some friends while we were watching the game, and the issue with playing Pakistan in a World Cup, I mean, we're very happy that we've beaten them, but it's so anticlimactic because there's all this hype before a game, and you had the Asia Cup hype as well, you had the Champions Trophy hype as well. But Pakistan are no longer that cricket team that they used to be back in the 90s with Wasim Waqar, batsmen like Anwar Sohail, Ijaz Ahmed, Javed Miandad, who had the wood over the Indian team. It's almost like a David versus Goliath situation every time we play them, because India is this massive cricketing nation with all the money, all the resources at their disposal, that it's superbly drilled, a fantastic fielding side, great batting, great bowling, everything's kind of sorted. And for Pakistan to beat someone like England or India, I mean, it's an amazing achievement and an amazing acknowledgement of the talent, the natural talent that they have. The fact that they managed to beat England, I'd say, was exceptional, and it was just based on the talent rather than the consistency which comes with playing big games, playing consistently, playing at home, playing big teams, none of which they actually do. So, I mean, we're always up for it, right? India-Pakistan, to our minds, is a massive game. But it for the last few years, it's been so anticlimactic. The Champions Trophy 17 final, yes, people will throw that in our faces, but it was completely exceptional. You had Fakhar Zaman, who played a blinder of an innings, who after being out to Bumrah caught behind of a no ball. And then you had Amir bowling a sensational spell. Without those two things, I mean, it was, again, natural talent. And India lost that, yes, but I'd say 90 times out of 100, they won't.
Yeah, fair enough. So you touched upon a lot of interesting things that we're going to kind of start double-clicking on. But just quickly to summarize where we are at the time of recording this, we are about just halfway through the group stages. India has played 4 matches, won 3 of those, and arguably has some quote-unquote easier fixtures on paper to follow, because of the remaining 5 matches, they play Afghanistan, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, and West Indies as 4 of them. Meanwhile, Pakistan unfortunately languishes in 9th place out of 10 teams with just a 1 win, 3 losses, and 1 tie. So they're stuck on 3 points. So Varun, let me kind of ask you a similar question that I asked DJ. Is the lead up to the India-Pakistan match overhyped? And kind of as a sidebar to that one, the captain of the Pakistan team himself was standing behind the wickets, yawned about 3 times in 1 over. Was he bored too, or the Pakistani players just bored out there as well today?
I think so. One can't help but look at all the Sarfaraz memes now. In fact, you've got one where Sarfaraz is yawning and you've got Kohli yelling just behind him. So people are now starting to superimpose pictures as well. So, I think yawning on TV is never great. Yawning in a meeting is never great either. Good point to note. But I think it is overhyped. I think this time it got a little bit out of hand. You know, you saw a lot of different videos, and the Mauka started taking a little bit of a different shape, and especially with it being Father's Day and all these jokes about We'll show you who's your real father and stuff. So I think it is a little bit overhyped. I think the reality is Pakistan did pull off a great victory in Champions Trophy, and all of us somewhere in the back of our mind know that India has a few teething issues, especially lower down the order, and we'll talk a little bit about that today as well. Like, India were on track to make 350 plus, and we couldn't get there. So I think one is aware of the issues. Without Dhawan, personally, I was a little worried that, if you lose 2 wickets early on, this match could have been very different. But I think the way the guys stepped up was really fantastic, and we'll be happy to chat a little bit more about it.
Yeah, thanks. Well, I think definitely interesting. Also, maybe we can start thinking about a spin-off podcast called Corporate Tips by Varun Garg, because yawning in meetings is never a good move either. So if anybody wants more of those, hit us up. Maybe he can start a spin-off. But let's get into it.
Varun, maybe you should get your juniors to listen to our podcast also.
Yeah,
just slip in some meeting tips on the way.
Maybe I should delegate that.
All right. So you touched upon the top order and the importance of Dhawan in the opening batting for India. So this time, for the first time in the World Cup, and the first time ever, I think, in an ODI, Rohit and Rahul walked out to bat. Now, Rahul's a celebrated opener in domestic cricket, in T20 cricket as well, but hasn't opened with Rohit Sharma. So we saw a phenomenal opening partnership by the two of them. And then Rohit obviously went on to make 140. The partnership was 136. So one of the highest opening partnerships in India-Pakistan fixtures. So DJ, let me ask you, just how good was Rohit Sharma's 140? How important was that? Again, knowing that the last time these two teams met in an international tournament, they were 15 for 3. And yeah, just how clinical was Rohit? Also noting he's made 122 in the first match of the series against South Africa and 57 against Australia. So what a patch for Rohit, right?
I mean, he's going through a massive purple patch, and I know you're going to troll me again and with the Rohit and no hit.
I didn't say anything. I just asked you an organic question about how good this is.
I thought he was fantastic. I mean, his batting, that 6 he hit over mid-wicket, admittedly it was a full toss, but the sound that was coming off his bat was incredible. There were a few nervous moments with Rahul and Rohit. They're running between the wickets, and it could have been cut short. And I mean, it's just a reflection, as I said, of Pakistan not being as well drilled as India, right? But not taking anything away from Rohit's innings. Fantastic innings. Some of those shots through the covers, through mid-on and mid-off. I mean, there was one drive which was just beautiful. Played out Amir really nicely, because Amir was looking like a threat with the new ball. He was moving it nicely both ways. And I mean, you can't speak highly enough of that innings. 140 in a high pressure match against Pakistan. I think it was just amazing. The slight disappointment was how he got out. I mean, I think everyone thought he was on track for a double 100. And I mean, if you want to go down as a legend in Indian cricket, I think a double 100 against Pakistan, there's nothing more than that. I don't think anyone could have actually topped that, to be honest.
I think most people would say 3 ODI double hundreds already kind of gives him legend status, but we know how you feel about Rohit and Roshit and No Hit and all these nicknames you've given him. But in my mind, I think he's pretty clearly, along with Virat Kohli, one of the 2 ODI legends in this team. And then we have some bowlers who I hope make it there someday. So Varun, let's talk a little bit about his opening partner. KL Rahul, tasked to open, ball was swinging, it had rained for the last few days. Stepping into Shikhar Dhawan's shoes is no easy feat. He made 57, he'll probably rue missing out on a bigger score, but how did you feel about him stepping into the position?
I think he did really well. I mean, I think he did what was asked of him. I think it was also great to see Shikhar Dhawan carrying drinks and gloves and continuously getting on the field and talking to Rahul, right? I mean, he knows what it's like to be out there. Rahul has just come into his place. So I think Rahul did a fantastic job. No doubt he is going to be playing second fiddle to Rohit Sharma, and Rahul really allowed him to do that. I also just want to add one more point. It was a thought that came into my head today, and it might sound a little bit boring, but we've talked so much about this number 4 issue. I was trying to draw kind of a decision tree in my head as to what are the options India has. And just to recap for everyone, over the last 18 months, we've pretty much discussed finding the right number 4. We've discussed flexibility in number 4. We've discussed maybe playing Kohli at 4 and Rahul at 3. I think the only thing we hadn't discussed is really the top order taking the responsibility to making sure that there's no number 4 position that's really being missed. And if you look at India's batting over the first 3 or 4 games, that's essentially what has happened. The top order has stood up. They've identified this as a gap. And by doing this, essentially, it's pretty much what all of us have been asking for, which is get the opening 2 or 3 guys to play the first 30 overs and have Kohli bat till the 45th, 48th over. You've seen him hit a 82. He's hit a 70 odd in this game. India has come close to 350 in both games where this has happened. Surprisingly, Hardik Pandya is the number 4 in 2 out of 4 of our games. So, I mean, I just want to call out saying that I think these guys have done well to be aware of their issue. They've tried to combat it. I don't think it's the solution. You could still have a game where India's 15 for 3. But I just want to say I think they've done well.
I think that's really interesting. And let's talk more about that. DJ, I'd love to hear what you think, because I think it's valid. And I think the number 4 debate probably gets over-focused on the situation where India does lose those quick 2 or 3 wickets. But the reality, to your point, is probably 80+% of the games, at least one of the top 3 fires. So DJ, before we talk a little more about Kohli, do you agree with Pandya having walked in at number 4 in the 38th over and then Shankar walking in at number 6? Or how would you have done that if you were captain of the Indian side?
I think it's interesting, and I obviously agree with Varun that the top 3 has been doing really well and they've been batting beautifully, but that doesn't, I mean, we all know and we acknowledge that the top 3 is the strength of the Indian team. And that's why I think there was a stat floating around a few months ago that 51% of the runs had come from the top 3, which was about 15% more than any other team. I think it doesn't put an end to the number 4 debate, right? Because, I mean, look at Australia. Someone like Steve Smith comes into bat for them at number 4. And a number 4 in a 50-over game is very different from a number 4 in a 20-over game. Number 4 in a 50-over game is someone who has to control the innings and knows where it goes. And needs to can kick off as well as nodle the ball around and rotate the strike. Now, logically, to my mind, if the Shikhar and Rohit combination hadn't been so massively successful and you could tinker with it, I would have opened with Rahul and Shikhar, Kohli at 3 and Rohit at 4. Rohit at 4 is logically the best place for him to bat. We can't do it, yes, because it's been a massively successful opening partnership. But now you've got Pandya coming in at 4, and that's a function of the situation that he's come in to bat in. He came in, I think, in the 38th over or something like that. And that's fair. I think Pandya can come in and bat at number 4 if we've done well in the top order. But I think Vijay Shankar will probably need to bat at 4 if we were 60 for 2, for example. As for where Vijay Shankar batted, I thought Kedar should have probably come in, but at the end of the day, both of them scored a run a ball, so not much of a difference, to be honest.
Yeah, fair enough.
And DJ, I totally agree with you. I think the issue is not going away. I think my point was I'm just impressed with the let's say the responsible or cautious approach they're taking. They're not firing in the power play as much as other teams, but that's because they're backing themselves. So I think it's just in the lack of another option, I think they're doing well so far.
Yeah, agreed. I agree with that.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. DJ, I think the one thing that you mentioned is Rohit at 4 in an ideal world, Shikhar and Rahul opening. I think that's going to be a highly controversial topic. So any listeners, send us some questions or thoughts or reactions to that, because I think like I mentioned, it'll probably go down that Rohit will end his career as one of India's most successful opening ODI batsmen. So it's interesting that you have so much hate in your heart for the guy that you can't even see him continuing at number 1 and want him to play at number 4, right?
I don't. I want India to do well, right? And logically, that's the place that he should bat. If you think about it, he batted at 4 for the Mumbai Indians. Why not for India?
Yeah, he promoted himself this year and they won, right? So anyway.
Yeah, but they've also won when he's batted at 4. They've also won in years where he has batted at 4 in a 20-over game. So, I mean, the debate isn't going to actually happen because Shikhar and Rohit are massively successful, right? And the reality is they will not be broken. So it's an academic debate in some ways. And it's not hate in my heart. I actually want Team India to do well. And I like Rohit as a one-day player. So, yeah. Okay,
let's leave it at that for now. But I'm sure we'll bring this one up again, especially if he continues to do well in the World Cup. So let me ask you about the next batsman who came in, Varun. And Virat Kohli walked in at number 3. Played, to my mind, an awesome innings of 77. I think he made of 65 balls. A really interesting role for him now, right? Where you and I were talking about this in person last week, but he's kind of become the master of the chase. And when we're batting first and the openers do well, it's very interesting to see how he needs to start by consolidating, being the anchor, and then can kind of switch over to being the accelerator later. But he only hit 7 4s, no 6s, and still managed to strike at nearly 120. What I really want to ask you about is his method of dismissal. So Amir bowled a short ball. He went for the pull shot. Bowler and keeper both appealed. Kohli kind of started walking a little. It looked like Murray Erasmus, the umpire, was not about to signal it out. And then obviously when Kohli walked, he nodded his head and he walked out. But basically, It was given out because Kohli walked. And then later we saw the replays, and on Ultra Edge, there was absolutely nothing. The ball was a good distance away from the bat. So walk us through that. If you were watching, what happened? And do you think, there needs to be a talking to by Shastri or some of the other leaders in the organization?
Yeah, I was surprised, to be honest. I think, I don't know, I was debating this with a friend. I don't know if Kohli's got too much into this whole PR game, and if it actually nicked and he hadn't walked, would that have worked against him? And does he just want to come out looking great right now? We were having that debate, but I don't think he should have walked. When I saw it on TV itself, I said, I'm not 100% sure. It didn't look that clear. So for Kohli to do that, it was a bit odd. I think the reality is nobody can really talk to Kohli in that organization, probably except for Dhoni. And it was funny because, after he went back into the dressing room, you saw Bumrah sitting right in front of him. Kohli saw the replay on TV and then started moving his bat around. So first reaction was, I really hope he doesn't hit Bumrah in his fit of anger. And the second is, you could see Dhoni just trying to take the bat out of his hand, and just kind of look at the bat and say, maybe there was a click, maybe there was a creaking sound. I don't know. But I think, I mean, unless Kohli was 100% sure, there's no reason to walk. To your earlier question, yeah, I think this is a new role for Kohli coming in when India has already done well. I think he's playing it perfectly. I think he knows that he needs to go run a ball, 50 runs or 50 balls. He needs to be there till the 50th over, because Kohli, we know fitness is not an issue. He can accelerate. He doesn't have to hit the sixes. So I'm really pleased with his role. He's not going to get the hundreds this way, but it's what's right for the team. And both times he's done this, India has almost hit 350, like I mentioned. So I'm very happy with the way he's going about it.
Yeah, I think that's really well summarized. So enough about the batting for now. I think there's going to be big discussions if Kohli walks in a match situation where it's a lot closer, or we're going to be talking a lot more about the role that Jadhav and Pandya and Shankar / whoever play if the matches get a lot closer. But obviously, this stage in the World Cup, we've had pretty much one-sided games for the most part. So let's talk a little bit about the bowling then. So Pakistan came out to bat. They lost an early wicket of a very interesting circumstance. So Bhuvneshwar Kumar bowled four balls in his third over, pulled up with a tight hamstring and decided to go off. Smartly, I think Kohli gave the ball to Vijay Shankar, because you give it to one of your full-time bowlers and your math about your quota of 10 overs each gets funky. Shankar comes on and gets Imamul Haq dismissed LBW on the first ball. So, DJ, were you watching that? What was your reaction? Did you expect Shankar to bowl that early in the innings? I think it was the sixth over. And did you expect him to get a wicket on the first ball?
Not at all. I mean, you saw him just come on. He hadn't even warmed up properly almost. So he just kind of ambled up and bowled that ball. And I mean, think about from the Pakistani batsman's point of view, right? So you've come out mentally prepared to play Bumrah and Bhuvi on this spicy pitch, and suddenly Bhuvi is actually gone, and then this kind of gentle, floaty, medium pace of Vijay Shankar turns up, and I think it just did them. And you could see Kohli's reaction, right? He was like, "This guy's taken a wicket," and he was like pointing at Vijay Shankar and stuff. And I thought that was just, I mean, it was unfortunate for Imam, to be honest. It was a beautiful piece of bowling, pitched on leg, and it was taking leg stump out. But I think it was just a mental thing. They were not prepared to face him so early on in the innings, to be honest.
Yeah, possibly. I think that's fair. I think the only other real thing I want to talk about from a bowling standpoint is our man Kuldeep Yadav. So, Varun, let me ask you quickly about him. He had a horrendous IPL. And then for me, bowled what was probably the ball of the World Cup so far, might end up staying that way, to break the 104 run partnership between Babar Azam and Fakhar Zaman. Just a peach of a like left arm wrist spinner's delivery, and he ended up taking another one after that. And so, are you feeling good for Kuldeep Yadav? Does he deserve this?
Absolutely, it was amazing. I think all of us are backing him. We know he's got the talent. For me, that ball was just spectacular, and Dhoni's reaction was great as well. I mean, even Dhoni looked shocked behind the stumps. So clearly, maybe Dhoni didn't tell him to bowl that, and he did that purely on his own. But it was, it was absolutely fantastic to see him bowl like this. He is a key member of the playing 11. He needs to play the balance of the games, and this confidence, hopefully, we've been talking about Kuldeep as a momentum bowler, a confidence bowler. Hopefully this brings it back, and we need him badly to show up on 30th of June versus England.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's, the reality is, even before the New Zealand game, which got washed out, which we'll talk about in a second, I was probably saying, hey, on a seaming wicket, maybe we go one spinner, play Chahal, and then go with the three seamers, bring Shami into the side. But I'm just personally so happy for Kuldeep. He's just such a phenomenal player. He's now playing T20s consistently for India. He continues to play ODIs. He's even played some tests. So just really, really happy for him. DJ, the final thing I want to talk about India-Pakistan before we move on to other topics is the role of Hardik Pandya, the bowler. So we've been talking about his phenomenal 48 in the first match. We've been just talking about him being promoted to number 4, but he came on today, picked up 2 wickets in consecutive balls, and basically those 2 wickets were the final nail in the coffin for the Pakistani team. Have you seen him step up? I think the stats were he was consistently clocking over 140, and for your all-rounder, who's your third seam option, to consistently clock over 140 is a pretty good place for India to be, right?
Absolutely agree. I think the coffee episode has really, I think it's changed Hardik Pandya as a cricketer. It actually, I think it's made him realize how much he needs cricket and how much he loves the game. He's been a completely changed cricketer almost since he's come back. I think he's a little more serious about his game. He still enjoys it, don't get me wrong, but I think there's that will to win and that will to do really well, and he's been working really hard on his fitness and his bowling in particular, and I thought it was fantastic. He showed up, bowled that that over which got 2 wickets, and with Vijay Shankar, who also bowls seam. So that was another interesting selection, I thought. Instead of DK, we went for Vijay Shankar, and that actually worked out quite well because with Bhuvi pulling up, we had someone who could actually bowl that seam, that play that role of that seamer, and we had Kedar, of course, who would fill in with the rest of the overs. So I think Pandya is now, he's cemented his spot as the number 1 all-rounder, despite Varun thinking that Kedar is number 1 all-rounder. I personally think that Hardik is number 1. Close contest though. And I mean, I think his batting, I mean, he's taking the confidence from his batting into his bowling. And he's been playing some nice innings. Today he tried a helicopter, which was unfortunate. We didn't actually see Dhoni teach him how to play the shot, but that would have been too good to be true.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was interesting because in the Pakistan match, actually, Kedar didn't bowl a single over, largely because Shankar was bowling so well. And I thought it was great captaincy from Kohli to let him keep going. So great result. India defeats Pakistan. Unfortunately, didn't live up to the hype we were hoping it would live up to. But, as Indian fans, always really, really happy with the result. And, I just looking at the math, I see Pakistan having a really hard time making it into the top 4 now. So let's hope a couple of results go their way so they can get more competitive. But I think this team or the squad has a lot of work to do before they can get much more competitive on the international scale. So with that, let's move on to other topics. We mentioned a little about the points table as it stands. India is undefeated, but does not have a perfect points tally. And by that, of course, I mean they've won 3 of their 4 matches and got 1 point in the 4th match, which was India-New Zealand at Nottingham. Varun, you and I were there for the incredible disappointment. Do you want to talk a little bit about what happened with the Nottingham game and just give me a little bit of your point of view on the weather in general? Like, is it ridiculous that they're hosting World Cups in June in England?
It was so frustrating and disappointing. We drove 3 hours to get to Nottingham. It wasn't raining as soon as we reached there, but it was the kind of game where there was not even a single ball bowled. And, for 7 hours, we were just waiting, looking for the sun. Overall, I would say it's frustrating. I think, look, the Champions Trophy was held in England 2 years ago in June, and we didn't have such bad weather. So hopefully this is a little bit unpredictable. But at the same time, I think while June is cricketing season, I think there needs to be more work done to make sure that the grounds are ready. I think all of us were saying that it didn't look like it was prepared enough. Ganguly was saying that even Eden Gardens has better equipment to deal with rain and wet outfields. And in fact, he even made a jab today to say that actually he thinks that Eden bought it from the UK, the equipment. So it's surprising that the UK can't do that well enough. So I would say as fans, it's frustrating. It's interesting today. I was reading about ad revenue as well, and what a great impact that has on the whole game. So really, from an overall perspective, I think June is cricketing season. It's going to be tough to change that, but I think the preparation needs to be a lot better.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely fair. DJ, let me just finally ask you. Varun mentioned preparation, but is the ICC doing enough? I mean, you live in the UK, so you're the closest to all this. Is this just unseasonable, bad luck, or should really the ICC be doing more? And I know you mentioned an article on Cricinfo by Andrew Fernando around facilities in Sri Lanka. Like, does the ECB and ICC just need to step up and do more?
I think it's really disappointing for a world tournament to have games washed out without any reserve days. I mean, for you guys as well as for us, I mean, My sister was here for 2 weeks and she had tickets to India, New Zealand a year ago, and she's been looking forward to it for a year, and she's ended up missing out on any World Cup action, which is a shame. I know your parents were here as well, and they haven't seen any World Cup action either. And I think it's just shocking because you lose money on hotels, trains, and you lose stuff on you've pre-booked. And I mean, it's just the disappointment of going back without watching it. And the issue with Nottingham, right, was it didn't rain that much on the day itself. It had rained a lot over the last 2 days, and they hadn't covered the entire ground. There were patches where the water runs off the covers, which were completely wet. And that is actually what had the game abandoned. It was actually due to a wet outfield, not because of the rain, because it didn't actually rain that much when we were there. So it's disappointing for a World Cup and a World Tournament to actually have issues like that. I think the ICC need to actually look into trying to get games where there is weather. If you're going to schedule a World Cup in May and June and July in England, if you're doing it in Australia, there isn't going to be as much rain, so you don't need to worry that much about it. But places like Sri Lanka, places like India, the ICC should have taken a leaf out of those places to work out how to dry the outfield. You saw as well, Manchester, for an India-Pakistan game, didn't actually have the whole square covered. But last night, I think Chetan Nirula tweeted something about halogen lamps being used to dry the outfield and stuff. They obviously didn't do that at Nottingham, but because it's India-Pakistan, because of the revenue involved, the ICC said, hey, we can't have 2 India games washed out in a row, and that would be a disaster for them, right? So they're aware of it. Whether it's high on their priority list, who knows? Who knows? I think it's just a shame for the fans, to be honest, and it's so disappointing for us.
Yeah, I completely agree. Hopefully, we've seen the last of the washouts. Varun, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to give some stats that I read about the revenue that DJ was talking about. India matches, except for the one with Pakistan, have sold for about 65 to 75 crores. The India-Pakistan ad revenue is expected to be 125 crores, almost double of that. And for non-India matches, it was staggering to read that the ad revenue is between 5 and 7 crores. That's 12 times less than a non-India-Pakistan match. So the pressure is on Star, the pressure is on ICC to have made this work.
Wow, that's pretty staggering. Yeah, I mean, you always knew that a lot of the fans come from India, but that's a staggering stat. So thanks for sharing that. Like I was saying, hopefully we've got the last of the washouts behind us, although I'm not too optimistic about it, but 4 washed out matches is already 4 too many for me. And so hopefully we're done with those. All right, gents, before we wrap up and move to our interview with our special guest this week, I want to ask you one question about another big announcement that happened this past week, and it was not World Cup related, but a man who played 40 test matches, 304 ODIs, and 58 T20s for India, made a cumulative total of more than 11,778 runs, announced his retirement this week. And of course, if you've been living under a rock, you don't know that I'm talking about Yuvraj Singh, big cricketer, big retirement announcement. So Varun, let me come to you first. I know you're a huge fan of this guy. Maybe just share with us your favorite Yuvraj Singh cricketing memory in honor of his retirement announcement.
Oh man, there's too many. I think the thing with Yuvraj is he's kind of that player who just invokes too many emotions. For me, I think for the three of us, I personally can't say I grew up watching a Sachin, or I have great vivid memories of Kapil Dev or Sunil Gavaskar or that. But I can say that from the first day that Yuvraj stepped onto the field, I was watching Indian cricket. His second innings of 84 against Australia, his 6 sixes, his man of the series in the 2011 World Cup. I think all of them are just phenomenal. I feel very bad that a player like Yuvraj didn't get to retire on his own terms. But to answer your question, sorry, I went on a tangent there. I mean, for me, it's that Australia quarterfinal where Yuvraj was just stonking the ball. Ricky Ponting had his hand on his head. What do we do? And then when he drops to the ground and kind of swivels his bat in celebration, I cannot watch that scene without getting goosebumps.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely fair. DJ, let me quickly ask you a favorite memory from Yuvraj Singh's career.
I think it had to be the NatWest Trophy final. I think that game actually changed how Indian cricket approaches chases. We chased 325 in that game, and a lot of us, I know, had turned off the television, right? And I mean, those flicks, those cuts, beautiful batting. I remember Varun when he mentioned Yuvraj Singh's 84 in his second game against Australia, plus a run out and a catch, I think, which was just fantastic. His catch in Sri Lanka, He had a great game. I think that was a knockout game as well. NatWest 6 sixes, Australia quarterfinal. Even recently, he had a partnership with Dhoni where I think he got 150, and it's very emotional. I think Yuvraj Singh he's always been a fighter. He's obviously battled cancer and come back into the game, and he's had a love-hate relationship with the game. I think his father pushed him into it and all of that. What a player! That backlift, Bhaji is actually, he's had an interview on Cricinfo, and I think he actually puts it very well. So go and have a read of that Cricinfo article. I think no one can actually put it better than his teammate Bhaji.
Yeah, thanks guys. Really great memories. You obviously stole all the good ones, but I'm just going to quickly pile on and say his 6 sixes of Stuart Broad are probably one of my favorite, because since then Stuart Broad's gone on to become one of the best test bowlers England's ever produced. But it's nice to have the memory that Yuvraj Singh tonked him all around the ground for 6 sixes. So Yuvraj, if there's any chance you or anybody you know is listening to this, congratulations. Thanks for being such an incredible icon through our childhoods, and we wish you well for the next chapter of your life. All right. That wraps up the first part of our show. As we've been doing so far in the World Cup, in the lead up to India's next match, we have a guest on to talk about the opposition. So India's next match is on June 22nd against Afghanistan. So we have a guest joining us for the second half of the show named Nihar. DJ had a chance to talk to him. He's written a book about Afghanistan cricket. So join us to have a good discussion with Nihar, and we'll be right back with that after this short break.
Hey everybody, welcome to another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. If you're not following us on social media, please make sure you do. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. We'd like to thank our sponsors for the month, Savari, Storytel, and Paytm Money. Thank you for your support. Also, guys, we're still hiring, and as I've mentioned before, I think IVM Podcast is probably the best place to work in the world. So if you're interested in joining our team, we're looking for producers, content creators, audio engineers, developers. We're looking for business development people. We're looking for data scientists. We're looking for all kinds of roles. So if you're interested, send us an email to careers@indusvox.com, and we shall get back to you, hopefully, and get you on board. We have a brand new show launching called The Origin of Things. It's hosted by one of the co-hosts of Simplified, Deepak Gopalkrishnan, better known as Chuck. On this show, he'll be focusing on the origin of famous brands. Chuck will drop fascinating hints throughout the episode, but the brand is revealed only at the very end. Will you be able to guess the brand before the reveal? Find out by tuning into the first episode launching on Wednesday, 19th of June. And Keeping It Queer is back with Season 3. The new season has more of everything, from stories to debates to discussions. The show also has 2 hosts now, Naveen Narona and Farhad Karkaria. Tune into the first episode of their reunion. On Cyrus Says, filmmaker Jaideep Sarkar talks to Cyrus about his early days in showbiz, why he enjoys making ad films more than features, and his recent launch film for Times of India's Times Out and Proud campaign. On Business.next, by Bloomberg Quint, Govindraj Ethiraj talks to co-author of the best-selling book Fish, Harry Paul. They talk about the importance of a culture of excellence in an organization and how it is one of the most integral parts of employee management. On Edges and Sledges, our new cricket podcast, Ashwin Varun and DJ are talking to the cricketeers and Atif Nawaz about the ongoing ICC Cricket World Cup. On the 99th episode of the Pragati podcast, Pawan is joined by Dr. A.P. Ashwin Kumar from the Center of Learning Futures to unpack nationalism, language and identity. Nationalism is also the topic of discussion on episode 39 of Pulyabazi, where Pranay and Saurabh are joined by Nitin Pai, director of the Takshashila Institution. On this episode, they specifically look at liberal aspects of nationalism. On Shunya 1, Sheila Ditya and I are joined by Pranav Kosari, founder of Flick and co-founder of Brandy. We talk about Flick, the world's smartest button, and Pranav's future plans in India. And with that, let's continue with your show.
Welcome back from that break, guys. We have with us this week, because India is going to be playing Afghanistan next Saturday, an expert on Afghanistan cricket. His name is Nihar. He's written a book about Afghanistan cricket, in fact. So without further ado, I'm actually going to ask him to introduce himself to you guys.
Hey, DJ, how are you?
I'm very well, mate. Thanks for joining us on this podcast. Do you want to give our listeners a little bit about your background and how you got into Afghanistan cricket and what ended up leading you to write a book about Afghanistan cricket?
Yeah, definitely. Well, first of all, thanks for having me on the podcast. My journey sort of began as a kid. So I am Indian, actually, by background, and grew up in the U.S. So it's a bit of an interesting mix, right? Being an Indian cricket fan in the U.S. I think cricket these days is sort of becoming bigger, but in the U.S., cricket has always been fairly an unpopular sport. And so when I was a kid, I used to watch the World Cup and follow the Indian cricket team growing up all the time whenever I could. And what happened was that probably in 2014, I think my family was on holiday in Australia, and I happened to see a newspaper clipping about the Afghan cricket team. I can't remember what team they played, but it was a really short clipping about how they had played a recent match and they had lost. But I saw the clipping and I just realized, you know what, I didn't actually know that Afghanistan had a cricket team. And since that point in time, I got sort of interested in Afghanistan cricket. At that time, I was actually in university, so I came back to the US after the holiday in Australia and decided to sort of look into the team because, I was just curious, didn't know they had a team. And I stumbled upon the Afghan Cricket Board at that time, and I had always been interested in writing, had written a couple books prior to this point, and I emailed the Afghan Cricket Board actually just out of curiosity and said I was a US writer looking to sort of cover the Afghan cricket team, saw they had a really inspiring story. And so that was what led to me actually covering the Afghan cricket team. In 2016, I traveled with them for about 3 weeks in Dubai and Abu Dhabi and interviewed Hamid Hassan, Mohammad Nabi, Sami Shenbari, a couple of the players there. And that's how actually I wrote the book. And I released it in February 2016 and was basically a history of how they went from growing up in Kachagari, the refugee camp in Pakistan, all the way up to the 2015 World Cup when they made their first appearance in the World Cup.
Well, that's such a fantastic story because I've actually read the book. It's called The Corridor of Uncertainty, and it's just a fantastic history almost of Afghanistan cricket and the characters involved that ended up with them playing the World Cup, right? I mean, it's a fascinating story of politics, of passion, of like just pure talent shining through the ruins of war. And I mean, it's incredible, that story. So I would definitely recommend anyone who's got even a slight interest in cricket to go and read that book. I think, Nihar, you've done a fantastic job writing that book. So that story did need to be told and you did a fantastic job telling it. So well done on that. So Afghanistan did actually qualify for the World Cup, but since then, they did actually win the qualifiers, beating the West Indies in the final last year, which was another incredible story. They were quite close to being knocked out and they managed to turn things around and get to the final, beat the West Indies. Actually, they won the whole show. Since then, however, it hasn't actually gone to plan. It started off quite nicely in the warm-up matches where they beat Pakistan.
Yep.
They won by 3 wickets with 2 balls left, and that was a great result. Everybody was expecting Afghanistan to cause some upsets because it's a 10-team World Cup. It's all very tight. You've got global superstars like Rashid Khan, Mujibur Rahman, Mohammad Shehzad, and all of that stuff. But since then, it hasn't actually gone as well. Now, there have been some off-field stuff. There's been stuff on the field. Why hasn't Afghanistan lived up to its potential at this World Cup? And is that quite disappointing for you as someone who's been quite close to the team?
Yeah, well, I think you're right. I think it's definitely disappointing for me, especially after having covered the team and followed the team and interviewed a lot of the players. And I think the biggest thing it's come down to for me is just the inconsistency. And I think this was something that happened in the World Cup of 2015 as well. And even when I was traveling with the team, back then when Andy Moles was coach, I had talked to him and he was saying, you know what, the biggest thing that this team needs to improve on is just its consistency. And I think that's what's continued to happen even 4 years later after the World Cup 2015 is that, yeah, the team has some good days. Like you mentioned the World Cup warm-up match where they beat Pakistan, and that was completely unexpected, right? I don't think anybody saw that coming, but it was an incredible match. But then since then, I think it's just been very inconsistent, especially from the batting side. I think one of the matches I remember was New Zealand just I think a week ago where essentially Afghanistan was 66 for 0 batting, and then all of a sudden they lost 4 wickets within 4 or 5 runs. And so it seems very inconsistent performance-wise in that they do well when they're playing well, but then all of a sudden one batsman will get out or something will happen and sort of the rest of the wickets will fall. And I think that carries over to off the field as well. It's just a lot of inconsistent. You sort of see some politics getting into the Afghan cricket team. And so I think that's sort of what's happening. And I think it's sort of happened because Afghanistan has risen so fast, and you hear it over and over again, is that Afghanistan's cricket team has risen faster than anybody has ever seen other teams rise to this level. And so I think there's almost this implicit pressure on them to perform well. And so because of that, they're sometimes performing really well and sometimes they're not performing well. And I think the biggest thing they need to work on going forward is just the consistency of performance. And I think that there's still a lot of maturity to do. A lot of people thought that coming into the 2019 World Cup, the maturity was there, but I still don't think the maturity is there. And I think a lot of it is due to the pressure they have just to try to play well, and this whole country behind them that wants them to play well. And after beating Pakistan, there was this pressure on them to really perform well once the World Cup started, and that just hasn't panned out.
Yeah, let's just unpack that a little bit. I'd like to speak to you about what prompted the captaincy change just before the World Cup. I don't know whether you've got any particular insight on why Asghar Afghan was actually removed and replaced by Naib. I think it was a month out from the World Cup, and then you had people like Rashid and Nabi tweeting about it and saying, why is this happening? What's your take on the whole captaincy debacle just before the World Cup?
Yeah, I think there was some questions around whether Asghar Afghan was the right person. And honestly, I don't have too much insight on that either. I know there's a lot of speculation around whether there's politics happening inside the cricket board and really what is happening. I don't have too much insight into that. But honestly, it's interesting, even with this match against South Africa, where Afghan was put in as a batsman and obviously didn't perform as well as people thought he was going to. And so I think there's a lot of tendency towards the senior players. But yeah, I honestly can't say too much about why Afghan was chosen, or why Naib was chosen over Afghan. It's very strange. I do think that sort of just goes back to them needing to mature as a squad and not sort of these last minute changes.
I think it was unfortunate with someone who's actually led Afghanistan to test status as well as the World Cup, the actual qualification tournament, to be removed before that. And I think that actually may have disturbed them a little bit.
Yeah. I saw some of the younger players as well. They were obviously very confused, and even with the batting change with South Africa too, obviously some confusion.
Yeah, absolutely. But anyway, maybe moving on from the captaincy debacle and stuff. So you've obviously spoken to quite a lot of their players and things. Mm-hmm. What is your take on their team? What is the vibe within the team? What are players like Nabi and Rashid Khan and Mujib? What are they like? Shehzad, I mean, he looks like a guy who's always having fun, but he's actually been sent home from the World Cup as well. So that kind of, I mean, it's just unsettling, isn't it? But anyway, maybe those are two separate questions. The first one is, what's the vibe like in the team, and who's the most fun person, the guy to hang out with? And maybe we'll talk about Shehzad a little bit later.
Yeah, definitely. I think when I was interviewing the team and when I was with them, I think generally the vibe within the team is very fun, but I think very intense too. And I think a lot of it comes from the fact that this team, as I mentioned before, has risen so fast, and they're feeling the pressure from everybody that's supporting them. And a lot of it is just because Afghanistan in the country, the fans, this cricket has sort of come as like the top sport. It's become the top sport. And so because of that, it's very passionate, very intense. And so when I was at their practices, their matches, it's very intense. They take it very seriously. And I do think they have a lot of fun though. And I know one of the most fun players I got a chance to interview and hang out with was Hamid Hassan. I think he's actually on the older side now at 31 years, I believe, but he's honestly just really fun, always joking around, always having fun. Always making jokes too. I remember when I was interviewing him, he always was joking with me about buying him a new pair of shoes because he saw my sneakers and was just like, how do I get a pair of sneakers like that? So yeah, all in all, a very funny player. Obviously, he's known to be one of the fastest bowlers from back in the day. Has been with the squad since the original times. But yeah, overall, very intense, but very fun.
Do they also sledge each other? Being a podcast called Edges and Sledges, we're always interested in what the sledging chat is. Do they sledge each other, the opposition? How does it go?
I think they definitely are always sledging the opposition whenever they can. The funniest thing I remember was that when they were working their way up towards the divisions, they came across playing the U.S. actually at one point. I think it was Division 4 or 5. I can't remember which one it was, but they came across playing the U.S. And it was really funny because they were always talking about how they wanted to beat the U.S. in some sort of sport. And lo and behold, they beat them in cricket. And so it was very funny. They were sledging on the U.S. when back then. But yeah, I think generally they're always sledging on whatever opposition they can, always looking to make a big win.
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, where they've come from, I think they were playing Japan back in 2008 or something like that. And then they've suddenly moved ridiculously quickly through the various tiers. They've had an accelerated growth in some ways, and they've made it to the top tier of international cricket. They've got test status. So it's been a meteoric rise. And the only thing we worry about as cricket fans, because there's a lot of love for Afghanistan cricket amongst cricket fans. We just love the way they play their game. The Asia Cup, I thought, was fantastic for them. They tied a match with India. I mean, incredible scenes. I'm sure the fans back home just went ballistic about that.
Yeah.
But I mean, one just hopes the off-field stuff doesn't destroy it. And one of the off-field disappointments for me has actually been Mohammad Shehzad, because I love watching him bat personally. He's from the Virender Sehwag kind of see ball, hit ball school of batting. And he was sent back from the World Cup, citing that he was injured. But he then later came out and said that he wasn't. So again, what's going on with that? Is it a fitness thing for Shehzad? Because obviously he isn't the typical idea of some people being fit, right? Was it just him not kind of diving for balls as a wicketkeeper because they got a replacement wicketkeeper, not a replacement batsman? So what went on with that as well after the captaincy debacle?
Yeah, I think part of it there was, I do think part of it could be the politics, but I also do think part of it was that he wasn't playing as up to par as people wanted him to. And he did admit that his knee, he had injured it and he thought that he was getting better, but in general, he actually didn't feel 100%. So I think part of it was that I think everybody wanted him to play, and you admitted it yourself that, yeah, I think I'm disappointed too that he was sent home. He's always been around with the team, and he's sort of the darling of the team too. But I do think that he wasn't up to 100% par as people thought he was going to be. And so I think there was a partial bit of politics, but then I think there was a partial bit of like, hey, he wasn't 100% there, and he actually did have somewhat of a knee injury. And so whether that was enough to justify sending him home or not, I don't think I can say on that. I think if I was in that position, I probably would have tried to keep him, just because you see how much the team was impacted and how much the fans are impacted now in terms of him being sent home. Absolutely.
And hopefully it isn't the end of the line for Shehzad, because he's one of those characters that cricket fans just absolutely love. Moving ahead to India-Afghanistan, which is on Saturday at the Hampshire Bowl. Nihar, who do you see as the key players that need to perform for Afghanistan to actually compete in that game? Because they haven't actually competed yet in this World Cup, and it's been disappointing. We've been waiting for them to upset a big team. Hopefully it's not going to happen next week. But who do you think needs to perform for Afghanistan to help them compete on Saturday?
Yeah, I honestly think the batsmen need to perform. So that includes Rashid Khan having to step up. I honestly think up to this point, there hasn't really been a batsman that has come forward and actually played well. I think Rashid Khan's been sort of the one who's played okay. But outside of that, I think all the batsmen, I don't think it's just one or two players. I think just the entire batting needs to improve. I think the bowlers are okay, but I think the batsmen all need to improve in order to actually have like a decent chance against India. And as it is right now, obviously in my heart, I want Afghanistan to do well, but I don't think there's a chance that Afghanistan upsets India.
Do you not think, have things changed so much since September last year in the Asia Cup, where they actually upset a lot of expectations by tying the game with India? Why have things changed so much for you?
I just think with the momentum they're on right now, there is the chance that they can have an off-the-cuff upset, but granted the momentum of the team right now with them missing Shehzad, obviously Naeeb sort of in in a new captaincy role, which was very unexpected. I think there's just so much inconsistency and speculation and sort of just a lot of things that are unexpected happening with the Afghan team right now, that I think it's going to take a lot for them to actually come together and be able to win against India, or even come close to winning. And so from my perspective, as much as I want them to win, I do think that it's going to be a fairly tough match.
I think we'd have to agree with that. I think India are just looking too strong after beating Pakistan by 89 runs, I think, today by the Duckworth-Lewis method, and they just look supreme. They're kind of in cruise control at the moment. So it looked like it's going to be a hard game for Afghanistan to win. But who knows? Cricket is a funny game. Afghanistan is a passionate team. Rashid Khan, as you said, can bat, can bowl, can field. Incredible cricketer. Maybe he's just going to pull out something from his hat, but we'll have to wait and see for next week. Nihar, thank you so much for joining us on this podcast. It's been really good to hear from someone who's actually been with the Afghanistan team. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about where they can find your stuff, your books, your writing, all of that stuff?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks again, first of all, for having me on this podcast, DJ. It's been really exciting to join you. And for all the listeners out there that are interested in potentially reading about the Afghan team, or even just hearing about the work that I'm up to, you can find it at my first and last name. So it's Nihar, Nihar, Suthar, Suthar.com. And there you'll be able to find the Afghan cricket book along with other things that I'm writing right now.
Fantastic. And we'll put a link in the show notes to it as well, so you can find it much easier. Guys, thank you very much for joining this podcast. It's been a fantastic chat with Nihar. We're looking forward to the India-Afghanistan game. I personally will be there to watch the game, so I'm really, really looking forward to watching Afghanistan put up a good fight against India, obviously hoping for India to win. And so we'll be back next week. As always, you can find us on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram. We'll be recording another podcast with another guest next week. So make sure you tune in next week. In the meantime, do leave us a review and do check out Nihar's website. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next week.
Janice, what do you think couples did before TV was invented?
I don't know, go for walks on the beach, long drives, fancy dinners, have more sex maybe?
But what did we do when we decided to move in together? We debated between the Chromecast and the Fire Stick.
We gave up on sleeping early so we could stay up watching true crime shows.
We got ourselves 3 cat babies.
And basically became the cutest couch potatoes around.
Okay then.
In case you guys still haven't got it, we are a TV crazy, Netflix loving, binge watching Mr. and Mrs.
I'm Anirudh Guha.
I'm Janice Sequeira.
And if like us you snort TV for breakfast, lunch and dinner, this is the podcast for you.
Tune in every Thursday on the IVM podcast app or wherever it is that you get your podcast from. This is
Mr.
and Mrs.
Binge Watch.
Look! Up in the internet! It's a meme! No! It's a cat video! No! It's the Geek Fruit Podcast!
That's right, we interrupt this riveting broadcast to tell you about our show, The Geek Fruit Podcast, where Tejas, Dinkar and I, Jishnu, talk about everything in pop culture, including DC, Marvel, Star Wars, Netflix, and everything in between.
You know how your friends hate it when you ramble about some nerdy crap and you just want somebody to listen to you? Well, sorry, there's nothing we can do about that, but come listen to us ramble and it'll almost be like the real thing. Kind of.
Listen to new episodes of the Geek Fruit Podcast every Monday and the Geek Fruit Bulletin every Thursday on iTunes, Google Podcasts, the IVM app, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Happy listening, you nerds.